The Fraterville mine disaster was one of the deadliest mine explosions and disaster of its time, with over 200 men losing their lives. What I have heard is actually, it seems like that most of the male population of the little community was wiped out in the explosion. So today, we are in Leach Cemetery, right outside of Rocky Top, Tennessee, to pay our respects to those who lost their lives in the disaster. It was an explosion that rocked the small community of Fraterville, Tennessee on May 19, 1902. Fraterville is a very small, unincorporated community located near the town of Rocky Top, Tennessee. Rocky Top is where we are today. We have journeyed here to look at the final resting place of many of the victims of the previously mentioned explosion. The Fraterville mine, one of several mines in the coal-rich mountains, was a staple in the Coal Creek Valley. The Fraterville mine was occupied by the Coal Creek Coal Company. The company began work at the mine in 1870 and, ironically, it was considered one of the safest in the area. Several coal companies at the time paid their workers in scrip, but the Coal Creek Coal Company paid in cash and was considered to have fair contracts and wages. On May 19, 1902, a violent explosion rocked the early morning hours at the Fraterville mine. Debris and plumes of black smoke violently bolted through the mine's opening and ventilation shafts. Immediately, a rescue team was organized by the mine superintendent, George Camp, and a mine operator from nearby Jellicoe by the name of Philip Francis. They were only able to descend about 200 feet due to toxic gases. Another rescue team made their way in a short time later using a makeshift venting system. When they made it to the main shaft, they were greeted by total annihilation and destruction. Most of the miners perished in the initial explosion. However, it was discovered that 26 had managed to barricade themselves in another passage. It was estimated that at least 10 men had survived up to 7 hours after the explosion, but passed due to toxic air and disappearing oxygen. Sadly, some of the miners had wrote farewell messages and final goodbyes to their families. The last body was removed 4 days after the explosion. In all, 216 miners lost their lives in the horrific accident, which makes this the worst mining disaster in Tennessee history. The cause of the explosion was never determined, but it is believed that it was likely from a buildup of methane gas. After the disaster, 89 of the miners were buried in Leach Cemetery, which is what brings us here today. This area is now known as the Fraterville Miners Circle. Now Rocky Top, Tennessee. At one time, this area was known as Coal Creek. Unfortunately, some of the victims have never been identified. Of the 216 lives lost, we know the names of 184. Those names are on the large center monument. Unbelievably, the youngest victim was only 12, and he was working in the mines. Another astonishing and terribly tragic stat: the entire adult male population of the small community of Fraterville was wiped out in the tragedy, except 3. It is estimated that 1,000 children lost their fathers, along with hundreds of widows. It is a sad but historic area. This cemetery holds the remains of 89 of the miners lost, and as I walked around the circle of victims, I was simply astounded seeing the same death date on all of these grave markers. This solemn place was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2005. The aftermath shows that although ventilation furnace operator and superintendent were charged with negligence, they were later acquitted. Although the Tennessee Commissioner of Labor report shows inadequate ventilation along with an open light caused the explosion, it also suggested that gases had leaked from a nearby abandoned mine. A massive memorial service was conducted on June 8, 1902 at Briceville Community Church. This was a disaster of epic proportions, and I felt that I should tell the story and pay honor to those miners who never made it home. The whole situation is heart-wrenching, but I was especially struck by the age of some of the miners and the ones who were unknown or had no family to care that they were lost. This was definitely an emotional visit for us and a terribly tragic story to tell. On this channel, all of our videos are about cemeteries or something to do with a cemetery. Please join us for future journeys. Another video will be popping up on the screen shortly. Please watch it for another one of our journeys. Once again, from Rocky Top, Tennessee, I will see you again soon.